My name is Daniel James. I'm an actor, filmmaker, and I teach metaphysics. I've always known that I was supposed to work in entertainment. I've always known that it was my calling per se to work in creative, expressive, forms of art. As a kid, I would play with action figures, and I would create these elaborate little scenes for them to be in, whether it was a little story or a romance or an action scene. I loved to create these narratives. And I remember me and my buddies when I was a kid, we would dress up as superheroes or action stars, and I would act out these little scenes for movies for my friends and my parents. I realized that as a kid, I was always just far, far, far away, lost in a daydream, in some sort of fantasy that I created. And I think due to the nature of my childhood and the circumstances that I went through as a kid, I would go off in my own fantasies as a form of escape, as a form of, coping to deal with a lot of the things that I went through. And I realized as I went through my teens and I was writing short films and music, I was still using all of my art and my storytelling and my performances as a tool for escape. Even into my later 20s, using my creative expression in that way wasn't the answer. So in 2012, I developed a lot of challenging medical issues, and I was in and out of the hospital. I was working a job that I absolutely could not stand. I was in the process of losing my house, going through all of these difficult experiences that ultimately led to my divorce. Based on all the challenges that I was going through, I'd felt like I'd hit, what we would call in our society as rock bottom. And with nowhere to turn and nothing else to try, I reached my spiritual awakening. I remember sitting in the car with my friend Jessica, and I was explaining to her this vision that I'd had my whole life, ever since I was a kid. I kept seeing the same scene play out in my mind, whether it was a dream or whether it was a daydream. I would have the same vision. And we're sitting in her car, and I told her what I'd seen. And basically, I remember being around this large circular table, and I could see Earth. I could see the planet Earth in front of me. And it was almost like I was in a council of beings, and they were fundamentally formless. We're all looking down at this Earth, at the planet, and I remember that a decision was made. And everybody in unison nodded their heads, and in that exact moment that we all made an agreement, I fell backwards, almost as if I was falling asleep, and then I was instantly born as Daniel James. And I've seen that several times throughout my life, up until the point that I explained that to my friend Jessica. And when I explained to her this experience that I'd been having, she jumped right up and she said, "Oh my God, I read that in a book," or something very similar to that. I read that in a book. It was called The Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. She gave me the book within a couple days, and I read it cover to cover, and cracked me wide open. I woke up. It answered a lot of questions that I had about life, about how life works, and it led me on this journey of self-discovery up until the point that I wanted to ask the question that so many of us ask. What is the meaning of life? It's actually simple, but before we can talk about the meaning of life, we have to take a step back and look at what's behind the curtain. Let's talk about densities and dimensions. The density of your body, of our physical matter, is the density of what makes up our physical solid universe is, it's like the consistency of rock or stone. That's the density that we're in. Right now we call that third density. We also have the dimensional space that we're in, which is, our height and our width. The density is the physical mass within that. So we fluctuate as physical beings. We fluctuate in between the third and the fourth dimension. Mostly the fourth dimension because time itself is a variable of what makes up the dimension. The third density that we're in, it's very heavy. It's like rock or stone. And as we vibrate faster as physical beings into lighter densities, the physical matter changes in its shape, in its space. So, an important process to talk about in what the meaning of life is understanding the tier system that we exist in within our density and our dimensional space. We are now third density, evolving or ascending into the fourth density. We're having a third, fourth dimensional human experience in this reality. Now, almost like a tier system, or like a pyramid, or like a ladder, we have above us in a higher dimension as what's called as the higher mind. This is our higher self. This is our multi-dimensional, fifth dimensional self. This particular being, it is us, but he's more so the director, more so the director of the play or the director of the movie. And we are the actors, we're the stars of our own show. So I am Daniel James, having a fourth dimensional human experience. Above me is my higher mind. Now above the higher mind, we have what's called as an oversoul. Now the oversoul it's a being much like us, it's a being much like our higher self, but it exists in an even higher dimension. And what the oversoul does is it manages several incarnations. It can actually handle up to 145,000 incarnations in any given moment. Almost like the manager of a store, or the oversoul manager of a collective of higher minds. And above the higher mind is the oversoul. Above the oversoul has an oversoul. And above that oversoul has an oversoul. And this pyramid, this tier system goes all the way up, climbing the ladder, climbing the pyramid in dimensional space to source. Okay? So what is source? Source it's all that is. It is everything in creation. Source is every time, space. It's all matter. It's every density. It's every dimension. Source is every moment in creation. That's what source is. Many people understand the concept of God. And God means something slightly different to many cultures, many religions, many forms of society. What God is source. What is source? What is God to those who understand God in the way that we do as a race? Source is you. You are source. You are God. You are everything in existence. You are all time, all experiences, all dimensions, all realities. You are everything that has been or will be experienced in creation. You are source. I am source. We are God. So let's say that you are source. So if you're perfect already, and you've already experienced everything that there is to experience, You exist infinitely forward, you exist infinitely backwards. How do you become more of perfection? How do you become more of all that is? If you're already perfect, if you're already in a timeless, boundless space of infinity in every direction, if you are God, how do you become more of God? Here's how that system works. Source, you, God, who is perfect as you are, you fractalize yourself into a tiny little piece, and you descend yourself down the dimensional ladder through time and space, through creation, through an infinite number of planets, an infinite number of perspectives, an infinite number of realities and dimensions. You send yourself down there and you play the game of separation. You play the game of illusion where you forget that you are God. You forget that you are Source. You forget that you are all that is, that you are everything in creation. And you play the game of separation. And the reason for this is because the fact that you've forgotten that you are perfect, you've forgotten that you are God, you can now begin again in a fractalized, separated version of yourself, in a one focused perspective, and you can experience a physical life, a physical incarnation. And the reason that it does this is because you can now re-experience life from your unique perspective of you, of Daniel James. Daniel James can experience all that is from his one unique perspective for the first time that it's ever been experienced that way. So the most seemingly negative thing that you could ever experience, the most seemingly negative thing, the most positive thing that you could ever imagine, they're all forms of experience that you go through. Heartbreak, falling in love, failure, success. From the perspective of your higher mind, from the perspective of your oversoul, who is managing 145,000 incarnations, just like you, in different star systems, on different planets, in different densities, in different realities, in different dimensions. Your oversoul is managing all of these different expressions of you, expressions of the one Source. Every experience that can be collected in any reality is fundamentally positive from the perspective of your higher mind, from the perspective of your oversoul, from the perspective of your oversouls all the way up to Source. It's all positive because everything that can be experienced, whether it's been experienced or not, by any number of infinite probable incarnations or identities, they're all unique, new experiences from your one unique perspective, that is you. And life can never be experienced exactly the way that it will be experienced through you. So back to the point. What is the meaning of life? It's simple. The meaning of life is just to be experienced. The meaning of life is to live to your fullest, most authentic self that you can be in any given moment, in any given situation. And the reason for this is because from the perspective of your higher mind and your oversoul, and your oversoul's oversoul, going forever and ever and ever all the way back to Source, all experiences are positive. It's how all that is, which is perfect, expands into more of itself. It's how you, through your perspective of your unique you, expands. Creation does not make mistakes. So if you're watching this video You exist. You're relevant. You're valid. You matter. You're important. You are contributing to God and Source. All that is and perfection is becoming more of itself because of you, by you, through you, for you. All that is learning. You are contributing to the expansion of all that is by just existing. So the meaning of life is to live. It's to be yourself, the best that you can be in any given moment. That's all there is. Is that cool?
Awesome.
Did I end that well?
Yeah.
All right. I rambled a little bit. I repeated some stuff, but so we can cut.
Yeah.
Let's cut.
Yeah.
We did it.
Yeah,
All right.
good, man.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.